my achievements, have to look up in the rafters for banners. Less of a dying breed, blame it on my ancestors. 2 sets ahead, I'm playing chess while you playing checkers.
Okay, so I guess we can get started with how you thought the first podcast episode went and what you've learned since then that you want to implement onto the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm back. That's pretty, like, I was going to say back bitches, but you're probably going to. That, I had a lot of time to think. Number one is I don't think I knew what to expect because usually, one, I don't prep for podcasts, and the ones that I've done, I'm the host.
Right.
So it's super weird. Like, you think, oh, it's just podcast and now you're the guest. It's totally different.
Right.
Number one.
You felt like you were being interviewed.
Yeah. And so you're right. For the first half, if you look at my nonverbal cues, I was acting like I was being not interrogated, but interviewed for a job.
Right.
And trying to really think about what you were asking and why. And then after a while, kudos to you, we're just talking.
Right.
So that was my first thing, is just because you've hosted a podcast doesn't mean you can be a good guest. And now I remember some people that were guests on podcasts I've done before where I didn't have to do anything. And I realized it's because they're a pro.
Right.
It's not because I'm asking good questions and they're comfortable with me. They've just known how to be a guest and figured out they've got their technique, but they're really good and they made it seem easy. So that part was super hard and a learning experience, and getting to watch it was cool. But the second part was so many activities, right? When you start doing a podcast and talking, especially if you're like me and kind of freeform lateral thinking, you look and go, oh, there's a jumping off point there. And that's another topic.
We could dive into that one.
Yeah.
We can talk some more about something else.
Right. And the question is, there's not a shortage of content. There's like, okay, but of that content ideas, like which ones would be a good podcast and which ones would kind of fizzle out after 5 minutes? And two, what do OODA loops is a big thing in cyber. So what are you going to do? Observe, orient, decide, act. You saw what you did the first time and you made it up as you went along. What would you do next time differently, or what would you keep doing?
Right.
That part was cool. So one, I'm glad to be back. Two, I mean, let's get some other guests. But I think that's my, good, we get a second crack.
Right. And I explained this to you, but just for context on the episode, my ideal plan would be to have more episodes like the first one with you, where I interview people, get backstories of interesting stories that, people may be curious about, for a number of different kinds of people, obviously focused around cyber. So some account execs, some CISOs, some deep level engineers, and just get like a full career background, what it is that they do day to day, like things that would be interesting to people. And then obviously, I also want to do some people in music, and some people around sports, and some other people, just interesting kind of Joe Rogan-esque style, where I'm asking questions I think people would like to know about those specific fields. So like what goes on behind the scenes of music, how what the writing process looks like, and beat selection and rhythm and all these things that people don't really have an inside track to, and have sort of interview style episodes. And then in between, not having an interview style guest, have you and me talk about current cyber topics, or cyber topics that people find interesting, or whatever it is within cyber that can be a sort of day-to-day type show where you can tune in once a week type thing and just talk about cyber.
And that excites me because, like, Ed McMahon or Sidekick is a recurring role, but it's pressure. Whereas Checkpoint recurring role is like frequent guest is cool. One. Two, I wanted to ask you about that around like you start a podcast and you got to be a SME or a specialist, but then you got to branch out. It's like a music, that gets a really cult following and then goes, well, if we're going to sell more albums, we got to kind of appeal to a general audience without pissing off our core base. And so I wanted to ask you a question, because I've messed with this a bit before about, is it better to be a generalizing specialist Like someone who's a SME and goes, I'll move from AI to cyber to wherever, but I'm known as the database guy. Like I'm a specialist, and I'm gonna generalize my skill and or a lawyer. I'm gonna go from it, but I'm the lawyer. Or is it better to be a specializing generalist? So a generalist is people that don't like us would go jack of all trades and master of none. Ha ha ha. And I'd go, no, I have this breadth of knowledge and skills, and I can specialize. If you send me into a law firm or a medical, in my case, cyber, I got really deep, but I think I'm a generalist that can specialize. And I love specialists that can generalize, because if you get into cyber, you need to surround yourself with specialists.
Yeah.
And you're the one generalist, kind of the orchestrator. And the question is, one, who do you think you are and which would you rather be? And two, apply that to podcasts, right? Do you want to be?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I've always struggled in everything that I do because I'm a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Like know that I'm capable. I constantly prove to myself for, I don't know, something internally that I can do stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'll just pick up something I have no idea how to do.
Right. Start as
from
a zero.
scratch.
Yeah.
But the problem I have is I lose interest once I get to a certain
once
level.
I get to 8,
like,
I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, I proved to myself that I can do this, but how interested am I in this? Do I want to do this forever? No. So I'm going to move on to the next task. And I know I'm really good. Am I the best? Probably not.
Also, I'm a zero next door. Like,
right.
So
I
why
could
wouldn't
go back and stay there, but that's always been a problem for me. It's been a problem with me in sports. I can't stick to a sport. I want to play basketball. I play all the way through basketball. Then I want to play hockey. I play all the way through hockey.
Yeah.
I pick up tennis. I'm really good at tennis.
Yeah.
Every sport I've picked up, I'm good at. And then it's like, well, I don't know how to stick to one. I feel like it's easier if you just happen to only be good at one thing, because like that's your thing, and you just ride that wave. And
I'm using 8 as I'm not saying I'm an 8 at sports or whatever, but when you get to 8, you see the 9s and 10s and you realize, okay, what I did from 0 to 8 was cool, but I'm going to have to double and triple down to get to 10. And they're all looking at you going, wow, how did you get to 8? But by the way, I'm 9 and you're not working hard enough and you need to do your 10,000 steps.
That's the
and
pros
sacrifice.
And cons, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I can be good at so many different things, which is really cool. But knowing that you have that ability makes it really hard to stick to something, because you're like, well, I could do this and I could do that and I could also do that. And I mean, career-wise, I don't think it's exactly the same. I would say a little bit, but I do know that I want to stick to sales and business entrepreneurship. Like that is definitely my realm, and you can be general there. Like you can, because my passion is specifically for sales and business, I'm okay doing any kinds of sales and business.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that like I have necessarily a super broad spectrum of skills. I think they're all basically business related. I couldn't just go be an engineer.
Right. I do
not have the backing to go be an engineer.
I was going to ask you that. It's still a core. And that's where I was going with the podcast is, hey, I same thing with sports, or engineering was a great course to take because that's just a general thing and you could decide what to specialize in. And I wondered, if there's certain jobs where you go, consulting or sales, or these are generalist jobs, whereas violinist, no way.
Yeah, and like to an extent, sales and business is pretty generalist. So I do understand, but I don't. Most aspects of my life, I just pick something up and I do it, and I'm good at it. I think there's a number of different jobs that I'd be like, well, I don't know if that's what I want to jump into.
I think too, it's nothing's ever. Like I understand when I meet those people who are awesome designers in Nortel, they went like, what else is there? I wanted to be a computer scientist. I was doing it at 15. There's nothing else. And if this company doesn't still do computer science, I'm going to go to another company, but I'm still going to be me, the computer scientist.
Yeah.
And I so appreciated not so much how much better than they were than me. It's that they paid the price. I went, wow, I got the 8. And it's almost like getting on the edge of the NHL and realizing why everyone deserves to be in there and that you're close.
Yeah, I mean, I think I try and scoop as best as I can a number of different things and go all out to all of them. And it still is a detriment to them to a sense. I'm sure if I cut all them off but one,
Mhm.
then I would be even better at that thing. But I've limited it to a certain amount and I prioritize those. And
Right.
I think it's enough. I just don't think I can ever pick one thing and
No.
just do that because I have too many things I want to do and there's too many things I'm interested in. And knowing that you can, like, when you know you have that ability to just pick something up and be good at it, it's so hard to just not.
And so where I struggled at your stage of the career with that, going, man, you got to find a passion and focus on it. These guys are right. You're not putting in the reps they are. The flip side is they don't care about anything to the left or right. They go, I don't care that I'm a zero there. I don't worry about that. There's no opportunity cost. I learned to go, I really like you guys. Like, I think I'm the D player on an A team. However, you suddenly become the coach and the general manager for very good reasons because they want to focus on being players. And that's not a disrespect either way.
The one advantage I would say of being that kind of jack of all trades versus a specialist, because there's advantages and disadvantages. I'd say the one big advantage is the ability to adapt. Like
100%.
If I get if I have to leave a certain career type or if I can't play a certain sport anymore, I'm like, I'll just pick something else up. But a specialist is like they have an injury that doesn't allow them to play a sport or whatever reason they can't do what they're doing, they're screwed. Like that's their only avenue.
Right. And they're lost. Now, maybe I was going to make a speculation. We can circle back to it, but this is just me like rehashing the career talk last time. I don't fear AI as much as other people because, like you said, I'm going to drop to the bottom and then I'll recover quick because I'm adaptable.
Right.
But that's a strength. And if I was a specialist, I go, that's going to wipe me out. It's going to take me 20 years to recover. Man.
Right. And so I think the major pro con is a specialist has a way better ability to focus. Like they can really drill into their subject and they're like, this is everything for me and I'm going to be the best version of this that I possibly can.
Yeah.
And a jack of all trades is not capable of doing that. They're just their eyes are wandering for all the different possibilities. And the disadvantage is a specialist cannot just adapt and go back to zero.
Yeah.
They have a hard time asking questions and evolving because they look silly as the specialist asking questions. Whereas I have no problem being an idiot for the beginning stages
that's my
of
learning.
anything.
Zero is what you start.
I'm happy to absolutely know nothing. Starting this podcast was I had no clue how to set up three camera setups and stabilizers and mics and audio interfaces into a recording software.
Yeah.
And then the whole editing process is another monster that was confusing to say the least. But I knew you have this like innate knowledge built into you when you've done these things that like, I know I can persevere through this. So when it gets complicated and it feels like there's no way I'm going to be able to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been here before. I remember what it's like to not know anything. And I know I'm going to find a way.
There's empathy. You're right. There's, you're a better mentor and there's this weird, I think one becomes, I'm speaking to me as a specialist has a hard time transitioning into a generalist, like being a coach or being a manager.
I think both of them have a hard time doing either.
I'll rephrase it. It's easier to give up because you go from coder to designer to architect in computer science, and then you become a manager and a director, and now you're a generalist. So a generalist goes, I'm going to give up being the smartest guy in the room and the best coder.
Yeah.
Whereas a specialist goes, ooh, like that's my kind of my power.
Yeah, like a
thing.
bank teller into a financial analyst into a whatever you want to branch yourself into is not going to likely then go into another sales role. Like you're the bank specialist. That's what you do. You deal with finances.
And it's your comfort zone. And you paid the price.
That's your area.
Like
whereas I have no problem bouncing from cybersecurity into medical sales, into whatever. I'm in the business of making money. I have no problem picking up a new subject and just running the same sales course.
Although you did say something that like what drives you is making money and there's the thrill of going from 0 to 8. However, I hung around cyber because it's conducive to being a generalist because you got 10 disciplines you got to run around. And I go, I'm really shitty at identity. I'm gonna go like fill that one out. Almost like a UFC fighter going, it's not good. It's good to have a strength to get in, but then you know that the more you work on your weaknesses, the better all around you'll get.
Yeah, I do like that there's multiple all kinds of different fields and different areas of cyber, and
Mhm.
you definitely don't have to be a specialist. But I think me specifically, why I was intrigued with cyber is because, well, money's obviously part of
Mhm.
it, but more so, it was the first sales job I looked at and went, I can't get bored here.
Yeah.
Like, not only
That's what I mean.
is it one of the very few sales fields that you're going to
gonna
run into like incredibly smart people all around you.
Yeah.
So you're constantly on your toes, no matter how smart you think
Yeah.
you are. But also, like, I just have this history of going to sales jobs, running them through the mill, being the top sales guy wherever I am, and then
Yeah.
being like, so what,
Now
am I
what?
going to keep doing the same routine for the
Yeah.
next 3 years? Like,
Yeah.
same pitch, same
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
same, like,
Bo-
I
boring,
get bored.
boring, and I'll fail. Like I won't just
Yeah, I
not
just
be
stopped caring.
motivated. I'll
I reached
I'll fail.
every achievement I thought I could reach, and then I'm like, okay, now what do I do? Like,
It also, if you, and this is what I realized is, that's what I like about it too, where someone else that was a specialist would go, oh man, like I invested 20 years to get to here. I want some protection. I want it to be a slow burn on the way down.
well, and if you know that you're not a great learner or can't pick up things quickly, as soon as you have something down pat, you're like, I'm not
Yeah.
giving this up. Like, I know my stuff now. I'm sitting right here.
We're like an artist or a blacksmith, like all those craftsperson things that you go, hey, Carl, you can be whoever you want to be, but you're gonna like apprentice, and it's gonna take you 30 years, and then you can replace me. I get why a specialist would go, first of all, my craft is appreciated, and that little 90% and 95% gets me more money, but also it's a barrier to entry where it's not changing all the time. Where cyber would be frustrating if you got really good at sim, if you got really good at defense in depth, and then some person goes, it's zero trust now. You go, I just
learned all that stuff. What do you mean?
Well, you're
Yeah.
resetting me? This is bullshit.
Yeah, you have to some extent be a generalist for cyber, and that it does apply to the podcast too. Like, I already have a hard time naming it control at decrypt and talking about
Yeah,
cyber
yeah.
because I do want to talk about other stuff.
It
There is
boxes
other
you
stuff.
in.
Yeah, I don't want to be boxed in. However, I'm trying to have it generalized to some sort, not generalized, specified to one sort of niche so that I can kind of have a target audience. And I'm hoping that my interview skills are good enough and that the topics are cool enough that people will stick around for other subjects, because I don't want to just talk about cyber, but I will kind of go with the flow as to what people like to see, because I want to make content that people enjoy listening to and watching.
That's code, everybody, for my best before date is episode 2. But it's just an interesting sidebar, right? About
Right.
generalists versus specialists. Because I absolutely hang around specialists and love them because I can't be them. But on the other hand, it's not a failing. It's a different, like you said, a different outlook on adaptability and interests.
Right.
And like, for instance, I bet you'd be a way better, I bet every producer and editor is an awesome generalist, whereas the musician, the artist, is just so fixated on their,
You kind of have to be, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
let's jump into some of the topics that I wanted to kind of work around here. So, well, first of all, welcome to, I guess, the actual beginning of episode 2. I'm going to try and do a little bit of back and forth before we dive right into episodes. So,
Yeah.
welcome to episode 2. First of all, I wanted to get into a little bit about how the dynamic between an SE or sales engineer and an account manager works. So we can give maybe a little bit of backstory of what I did at ISG. So in cyber, generally, you're going to have an account manager or an account executive who's in charge of the sales pipeline, running the sales leads, starting a sale from front to finish. And then you generally have an SE or an engineer either dedicated to you or as part of a team. So most sales calls will incorporate both of you taking pieces of that. And so when I worked at a startup where they didn't have the resources to give me a sales engineer, I used my dad as a sort of makeshift SE. I would consider you much higher than an SE, obviously, but you filled that role for me needing a technical person to deep dive to a client, because the reality is a salesperson, as technical as they want to be, trying to explain to an engineer on the other side the technical aspects of things look silly.
Yeah.
Because you can understand it from a base level, but if you don't really understand it in depth, when you go to answer the questions, you just don't look good.
And vice versa. Like I'm not a natural salesperson, so I don't always have my eyes on the prize. I get, something interesting, or if we are trying to stick to a pitch and a close, someone has to focus on that, and you can't be the technical guy, and I don't care about that as much. And
right.
so,
I've had engineers I need to cut off.
Yeah.
I jump in and go, okay, that's enough of that, and we're moving forward, because they just don't. There's a social cue aspect that like they just don't understand the client and the art of the business. So there's going from explaining the details to you're over explaining, and now I'm gonna be in a hole because you've over explained, or you're like, well, this is also a really good product. You don't have to buy ours. And I'm like,
you're losing them. And I know that switch gets flipped when you get excited as a technical person because it's just exciting technology, or you're explaining to people and you totally forget where you are.
Right. Or vice versa, you can also be like, this stuff's not that great. I tested it in my lab and actually got a lot of holes. And you're like, well, let's not explain that part.
That's the part I learned on the pitch and catch, that you have to understand it's a sales meeting. And so,
well, generally I try and run the course of the meeting. I try and do some sort of presentation.
Yeah.
Sort of explain what I'm looking to do, and then I walk my engineer into the explanation. So I say, we're going to talk some deeper levels of what the firewall has capabilities on. Can you, Carl, explain sort of how the firewall works? And as soon as it looks like it's getting any more than that explanation, I cut back to my other slide, here's where we're going here. And then I open the questions up, and I still, even on the questions, will sometimes cut the engineer off and lead it back into a...
I think it's like either a jazz band and there's a song and then there's the soloist, or like a rapper where the rapper can freestyle, but the song, like the maestro or the person leading it, decides how long and what you do, and lets you know, hey, we're doing really well here. I don't need your solo.
Well, I also try and give context to the engineer before we even enter the meeting. Like I say, listen, this guy's really tough, or like this technical guy's going to ask a lot of questions, and he knows of the competition. Yeah. So you need to be really careful about what you say on the comparisons and whatnot, and let me do the talking here, and here. Like I have there's always a little pre-meeting of like, okay, look, this is the game plan here. Yeah. I don't just walk in going, well, let's figure it out. So
and as soon as you know the context and that there's a tech other person, you go, okay, that's the person I'm trying to deal with. And you got to be ready, like a guitar soloist. You got to go, I can't have a pre-canned thing. I don't know what the person's going to say to me.
Right.
But what I've learned is what the salespeople say is like that shaved monkey hitting the cymbals. And they're not wrong. Is I'm going to put you in a box and I'm going to signal, like watch my cues. I'm going to open the box and you're going to do that thing. And then I'm going to close it. But I'll leave it open. I'll let you know, keep going. You're doing something good. And so you can still be that tech closer, but take your cues off this guy's going to bring the jazz song back to the main chorus, and you got to make sure you are watching them going, should I keep going, or should I stop?
And on that note, like, it depends person to person, right? True. I'm talking about certain engineers. There's also some really good SEs that
just know how to,
the more they talk, the better.
Yeah.
So they know how to angle the sale.
Yeah.
They're well aware of how
they're almost serving you up a softball. Yeah.
I wouldn't get them to run the sales call, but I would certainly allow them the room to direct where it's going.
Latitude.
Yeah. It depends who you've got on your
team. Because you
team.
trust them and you know they're going to bring it in for a landing.
Right. You got to be aware of who you're on the call with. Yeah. And you bring certain engineers to certain calls based on who you got to read the room.
Which was your job. Yeah. I'm bringing a resource for a reason.
Right. There may be sometimes you want to bring the deep technical guy. There may be sometimes you'd rather the kind of salesy guy that'll just sort of brush up around the edges, but that's kind of how the dynamic works.
The other funny thing I noticed, like more in startups, I got forced into the sales role, is as soon as you're in that role, you have zero tolerance for the engineers doing that. You go, dude, man, like I'm trying to sell something. And you immediately, because you have that ownership, you have zero tolerance for like people going all over the place and not.
Yeah, I'll tell them I'm not bringing you on a call with them again.
Yeah. No, it's
It'll be pretty
it's a
quick.
weird. And you go, you would think I'd be an engineer and you'd think I'd be the VP Eng and that personality. But you go, once you have that role, you're like, look.
You'd be surprised how much managing relationships is part of that sales part. Like just knowing this client is not going to like this guy.
Right.
Like that, you wouldn't think that that's part of the job, but it really is. Like,
That's interesting.
just even language preferences, French guys like French guys, like certain things like that.
Gender, age,
There's
they all matter.
There's all kinds of. I try not to bring another young engineer with me because two young guys explaining to an older crop of people about what they should be doing with their systems doesn't usually go over well.
It's also that's the first time where I understood the Carl. Like people would, when I'd say it, I'm joking. When people would say it, they go do your Carl thing. And I go, what is the Carl thing?
Well, and you being a generalist means that your people will bring you to a larger number of calls, but it also means there's specific calls that they will not bring Carl on. There's specific calls that you don't want Carl on.
You're gonna disrupt it.
There's a majority of them where you go, he can just go do his thing and I don't have to worry.
And I'm fulfilling a need. Like it's no, we've already thought this through, and the client needs X, and it needs an old guy, ex CISO, to kind of explain to them, like, I'm going to hug the other CISO and let them know it's going to be okay with this product. I don't mean to be superficial, but they've already staged the event for me to be successful.
You're good at being the hypothetical guy too.
Yes.
Well, what if this happens? Well, what if this happens? Well, this can, like, you're good at dancing around that. Whereas some of the deeper technical guys would go, I don't know.
I'm in a box.
I don't know. I'd have to do this. Yeah. And then you go, you just gave the client no confidence that this is going to work.
Yeah.
So there's just, anyway.
Good question, because it's I didn't realize the amount of prep that a salesperson, and almost like the dinner, who's sitting with who at a dinner, has everything to do with who you invite, and it can go off really well. And a person like me goes,
the battle's already won before it's even started.
I always think it just went well, and then I realized the amount of choreography the host did.
The strategy's already long been put into place. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on was I want to get into explaining some certain types of cyber attacks, how they affect the general person who may not really be aware of how they work or what to be looking out for. And one I get questions about from some friends and mostly older family members.
Like older than me, right? Older. Yeah.
Well, in your range, but
I know what you did there.
Not as
boomers. Anyone over 60 is a boomer.
Not as technically inclined. I'll call it that. But I usually get questions about, is this real? I get that question a lot. Send me a link. Is this real?
Right.
And I'm like, first of all, please don't send me the link.
You burned a pro.
You're now. Yeah. You're.
Does this look infected? Touch it.
Yes. So thanks, but no thanks. Maybe send me a screenshot, but don't send me the link.
And the term "real" is it's interesting term. I get it. Is this real? Is this legit?
Right. And so that this is what I'm talking about is phishing, right? So one of the most common cyber practices from people trying to get into a network is phishing, because it's easy. You can mass spread it. You've got a high probability of somebody not understanding what they're looking at and clicking on it, and it's really easy to gain credentials. So what you'll often have is an email or text. From what I've seen, the majority of times it will have a link on there, but sometimes they're just asking questions that they're hoping you will reply to. And it's almost always going to be what's called a bad actor, right? So it's going to be somebody who's pretending to be somebody else, head of Amazon HR, CRA employee.
They'll credentialize themselves.
Things that you either use often or would be scared if something was going wrong with. Right. And so what they're often asking you to do is simply, hey, we've had a security alert, or you have a message, or there's been a charge to your card, things that would make you go, oh shit, I need to log in quick and see what's going on. And it's going to ask you to log in, oftentimes with a fake web page that looks very similar to what Amazon.com would look like or CRA would look like. And then you are in what looks almost like a mirror of the actual web page, but you're on not the actual website, and you're putting in your username and password, which is now keylogged, and now they have your username and password. So that's sort of the idea of what goes on. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about what that does, what the current state of it looks like, and how to avoid it.
Right.
So from your experience, what happens next when you go log into somewhere
Right.
that you weren't supposed to? You clicked on a fishy link, no pun intended.
Yeah.
And you entered your credentials in. Now what happens?
I would say, like, if I'm thinking of being the bad guy, I'm harvesting, right? I want user ID and password. And really, if I've done my homework too, I'm gathering what I call digital footprint on you. So that's that idea of, I'm sorry, but every time you go on Facebook and you send photos and you talk about your spouse and your daughter, I'm getting more what I call 411 on you.
Your data harvesting.
Yeah, and every little bit counts, but the user ID and password are the golden gooses, right?
So explain why someone. So I'm sure this would be a question for some people. Why does it matter that you have my, say, Amazon password? Okay,
right.
You could order some stuff and I'm going to block you.
Yeah.
So what's the real threat there?
A couple of things, and good question. Number one is credential stuffing. So I theorize, if you give me your like, first of all, I'm going to guess, right? You did some things with your birthday or your pet's name, and why? Because they're familiar with you and you're going to reuse them. Right. So anytime someone gives you a password challenge, you're going to go blah, 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 and you think you're being random, but you also want to remember it. So my suspicion is, if I get one password of yours, I probably may have a good shot at it also being the password for any of your other accounts.
Right. And not just, that's a little bit more time consuming, but on top of that, they're just going to plug and play that username and password and type it in to everywhere. A whole to as many banking sites as they can, as many Amazon websites as they can, as many. They're just going to run the same username and password using some sort of computer programming system.
There's no cost to getting lucky, right?
It's going to be one click, and they're going to try 100 and probably thousands of websites, and go, oh, actually, I just got in here,
and
now
there's no
buy a bunch of stuff.
There's no effort, and there's no cost. Like the fact that I fail doesn't alert the police.
So I don't think people are really aware that, like, okay, yeah, they just got my password and username for this, but did you only use it for that? Probably not.
Yeah.
And then not only could they look at the information and try and guess other ones, but they can, one click of a button, program it to go check other websites for, do you use that elsewhere? And now they're into a bunch of different stuff. And what can happen is, let's even just say they get into an email, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, great. They didn't get into your Amazon or your bank account, but they got into your email.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how many of those sites do you have your email as your two-factor authentication? So now that I'm in your email, okay, I didn't get your Amazon or your RBC, but I'm going to send the two-factor authentication back to your email, and now I have the code because I'm in your email.
Yeah, and variants. Let's say I go Carl Feb. Well, it's possible I use March. It's possible I use, like, you can start to try variants.
Right. What do you think people need to look for as indicators of what may be phishing? So when they get an email in, what should they be looking for to go, that might be phishing?
Number one, call to action. Number two, urgency. So that's the first, you get this feeling like I got to stop what I'm doing and do something. That's not a good, like, I try to, let my gut go, wow, I'm being told to stop what I'm doing and do something.
So unfortunately, part of it is common sense. Like, is this a request that makes sense for me to have?
Yeah.
I don't understand why people have such a hard time looking like, should I? Like, okay, it's asking me to log in, but why?
I think you're right that people like to be helpful. So if a stranger on the street has a sense of urgency in their voice, you don't even like stop to size up if it's a bad guy or a good guy. You just help. And so I try to have a 2-second pause in my gut going, oh, I'm being told to do something. So,
well, so also I think most of the time, almost any company you have a login and password with is never going to send you an email and ask you to log in.
Right.
That's not going to be part of what they're asking you to do.
I'm with you.
They may send you a message saying X, Y, and Z has happened, but they're not going to say, and log in.
I even go a step further and go, I don't take direction from emails.
Right.
Like, you're not my boss. And I'll even like reply, and it'll.
So actually on that too, though, when you go to reply, another huge indicator that you're being phished is you got to click on the long link of the email. Like click the
1,000%.
click the drop down menu. So one thing I don't think people understand, when you get an email, the title of the person can be made to be anything that you want it to be.
Yeah, good
right?
call.
The email address cannot be whatever you want it to be.
What do you
but
call
I
it?
can make
Rollover or whatever it's called?
my title of who I am, I can say I'm Amazon customer service. That's allowed.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be something that no one else has. That can be my name.
Yeah.
But the email itself will have to say what the email is.
Yeah.
So when you drop down that menu, if it does not, you can go into your email and look up your Amazon emails, look up what the email is, and if that's not the same thing, it's phishing, right? And if it's from something that you don't have an account in, obviously it's not. So go back and look and match the emails first and foremost. You will see something is off in there. You'll see they're getting trickier now.
Yeah.
So they're just putting a
Dot,
period in the wrong spot, or an A with an accent on it.
Cyrillic alphabet.
Right.
Yeah.
So those, you have to look for the little intricacies to match the email.
But it's the most obvious one is the domain lining up with who they are. The other one they used to do was like really obvious spelling mistakes, and but that people are getting better.
Much better with that. Yeah.
The one I use, the best one, and this is advanced, but you're right. The first one is the scroll over on the domain. The second one is, like you said, is this the kind of stuff that people normally get me to do over email? Like, is it my son? Is it someone that, and they're doing what they normally do? They're asking me to make a money transfer, or they're like, is it all seem in reasonable scale? That's my first one. Like, this is a lot of coin, or sometimes it's just it's me, Brad, you should check out this link. And so I like the scroll over. The other one I like is one called, and I may have learned this in the classified side. It's called triangulation. Like the expert interrogators, or like a boss that doesn't trust you if you're a contractor, they triangulate. So if you were to give me an instruction or a work instruction to do, instead of going back to you, I go somewhere else and go, yo, is Brad like needing money? And did Brad, like I try to check another source to see if that's true. So in the case of like your bank sends you an email, call the 1-800 bank number.
Right.
Or don't call the one in the email. Yes,
that's the.
But go. I'm gonna go phone my branch manager and go, did you give me an extended credit limit?
If you're not sure, Google the phone number of whoever is contacting you. Do not use the phone number in the email. No, you're right.
Yeah.
As worst case scenario, but hopefully you can look through the other indicators and determine already. But yes, as a worst case scenario, if you're like, wow, this sounds urgent. If this is true, I need to do it.
Yeah.
And you're confused, Google the number of wherever it is, your bank, your Amazon, whatever, call them and ask, did you guys send me this email?
And so I learned that from a boss who was ex-military and intelligence. And if they valued my consulting opinion, they'd ask me a question. And then the next thing they do is go and ask another consultant or someone that knew me and went, what do you think about that? They'd ask the same question or a variant. And then they go, okay, are these two lining up?
That's often what people do in sales too, to see
100%.
who they can trust. They tell what I've done before. You tell a story with a very small variance in each one of them, and whatever story gets back to you, you know which person is
who's the mole.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's or in the neighborhood, right? The neighborhood, your neighbor gives you some friendly advice about people are complaining about your dog, and instead of reacting, you just go ask another neighbor, hey, anything about my dog? And then you kind of ask about the other neighbor instantly and go, okay, either they're representative and I should do something about my dog, or they don't like my dog. And you kind of, you build a trust bridge.
Well, so some of the other things, I think the two weighted sides that I look for first in these emails to tell if they're phishing or not is this too good to be true, or is this too harmful to be normally accurate? Like, is the CRA going to say that I owe him $40,000 or I'm going to jail immediately?
It's the scale of the...
Probably not. How many emails did I get from CRA? That's not usually what would happen. And is this some deal
Yeah.
or this
Too good to
lottery
be true.
or this money that sounds too good to be true? Likely those two things are not good.
I like what you just said there about like there's a call to action and an immediate sense of urgency, and there's a big win or loss. Like if it's for $2,
I mean, not
You're not
always,
gonna
but those
do
are
it.
good indicators. Sometimes they just want you to log in.
but
They'll but,
the
yeah.
effort of you doing it versus the payoff has to be huge for you to go, wow, I'll roll the dice, $1 million.
Yeah, usually there's either something really bad or something really good that should be obvious.
Otherwise, you're
indicators.
busy, right?
Right.
And so, would you like to take a survey, Carl? Well, absolutely
And so
not.
after highlighting some of the things that you should look out for, some of the things that are very hard to tell are the website that you go to when you click the link
Mhm.
is oftentimes next to impossible to be able to tell the difference between that
it's
website
close.
and it's
It's
so close. So don't think that clicking the link and looking at the website is going to help you.
Yeah.
The name of the person, so the name given to the emailer, can be put to whatever they want. So that can look really legit. They can have the legit logos, the legit title.
Mhm.
So that does not help you. Looking at that and going, oh, look, I'm verifying. That's not a good indicator. It's the actual direct email.
Yeah.
Go back and look in your list and see, does this match? Or even just, does that look normal?
Yeah.
Is it at Amazon.ca? If it's not Amazon,
Yeah.
period. Right? It doesn't matter what's in front of it.
Yeah.
If it's not at Amazon.ca exactly like that, it's not Amazon.
And if you're hovering over a link, like here's me, like I go, if you're having any kind of pause, like I get it. Sometimes you can be phished and clicked or CRA email the day after you submitted your taxes and it's just too good to be true and you just don't think. But as soon as you're pausing and hovering, I go, the minute you're hesitating, the answer is no.
So here's the next part, right? This is where phishing has gone, I think, in the last few years, because phishing usually was pretty simple. There wasn't a whole lot of thought into it. It was, here's a link, hopefully you click it. Now there's some social engineering that goes into it, right? There's a lot of thought into why are you specifically receiving this email?
Why are you special?
Right? They may look into buying data from ad places. So what have you been clicking on recently?
And what's your digital footprint?
Right?
Because that customizes it to you.
Right. So then they will look for recent purchases from specific websites, which they shouldn't be able to get, but that floats around the dark web, right?
Yeah.
So if they can get information on where you've purchased from recently, and then they can send you an email from that place, you're going to be much more likely to. Or just simple things like, it's tax season. I know that there's a large number of people who just submitted their taxes.
Yep.
So if I wait until a couple of days after, I've got a bigger chance, and that's the social engineering aspect of it, right? I'm going to
Super Bowl scam.
Right. I'm going to manipulate these people's ability to decipher whether it's true or not, because it makes sense. I'm adding some context to why they're getting the email, and now it's become a little bit harder to figure out.
I think too, if you understand on social media, when you get active, the next day the ads are tailored to you.
Right.
If you're traveling, if you're understand if you're active on social media or dating apps or Instagram, it's a feedback system. So the next day,
and this data is being leaked. This is the most important part. Is it's
100%.
supposed to stay internal, but it gets leaked to the dark web and used for not great purposes, and
even accidentally, right? Like let's say collection agencies, they're your phone bill's overdue.
Right.
So now the collection agency gets all your phone bill information.
Right. It's not necessarily from the source. It can go out, and then from there it can turn bad. I think this is also good for context of phishing, and also for credential stuffing in where you can have your login taken.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a dark web where cyber, what is the word I'm looking for? People who
Keep going.
Attack, do cyber hackers. Why couldn't I think of that?
Because I've got cognitive things. If I were to not remember something, you'd go Biden on me.
Okay. So for context, for phishing and for credential stuffing, when talking about stealing logins and getting you to click on links and whatnot, there is an area of the web called the dark web where hackers will sort of crowdsource information.
Well put.
And allow you to use that information to get into certain accounts of yours,
Yep.
right? And so
100%. It's trade craft
and that's
to put out. These are valid credit cards. These are valid user IDs. It's 100% what they share.
and so what they're doing is they're selling the information, right? And you're
100%.
selling it to a group of hackers.
On a marketplace.
Right. Exactly.
Like,
That's
think of-
basically what the dark web.
Dark
is,
web
right?
used to be Silk Road, right?
Right. And
Trading
so-
drugs. So now they're trading in what I call illegal cyber collateral.
Right. And it allows them to do fraudulent scamming and identity theft and whatnot. And
The other, can I interrupt for a
Yeah.
bit? Think about the kill chain there. You and I are trying to be an SE and a salesperson and sell people cyber. They're way better at collaborating than us, because it would be a pain as a hacker to go, first I got to go get the credentials and then the payload and then the ransomware. I'm just going to focus on ransomware because I've got my buddies taking care of credential stuffing and I can just buy.
You
It's
just
such
buy
a
the
great
information.
market, man. Like, why are they so good at that and why are we so shitty at collaborating in cyber, right?
because crime pays.
You know what? That's
There's
interesting.
more money in it.
There's more money to, like, all things equal.
Yeah.
Wow.
So not only that, but I don't think a lot of people know that there are tools you can use to scan the dark web, right? Like,
Yeah.
I have personally, and this isn't really super cyber, like
Right.
deep into cyber, but just in anybody in your Google accounts, okay, you can go into your Google Drive and your Google sort of Gmail area, and they have a dark web checker,
Right.
and it has a password management that you use on Google.
Like don't be scared because you're a noob.
Well, Google has a thing that says we scan the dark web,
Yeah.
and we found your information pop up 5 times.
What I mean is, like, people have this view of, if I'm not sophisticated, don't go anywhere near the dark web. You're opening the Pandora's box.
Right. And my point is more, you don't need like sophisticated tools. Places
Exactly.
like Google already have
I
very
agree.
easy to use. You just have to check into it, and it will tell you this password has been shared
Yeah.
7 times on
Heads
the dark
up.
web.
Heads up,
You
buddy
need
boy.
to change this specific one.
And it's, to your point, I always say that, but I want to, to your accurate point, it's not like one time it got breached. It's in play, and you've used it in 7 places. Like, your go-to password is
And it-
getting passed around.
Well, it also might not have even been breached yet, but they're aware of that password.
You're-
and as
you're
soon
in
as
play.
you use it somewhere else, it's going to get. So you need to change it.
I appreciate that. There's a few, and the Amazons and whatever will go, hey, Carl, I love you, but we have evidence, and it's their cyber people going, we're not going to tell you, but you're showing up on the dark web like that your user ID or your name plus that password, it's in play. So just a friendly suggestion to change it here, and you may want to change it elsewhere too.
Right. And there's an easy Google checker for that, right? That you don't need anything sophisticated. You don't need
Nice.
anyone's help. It's very, very easy to use.
That's the better thing about, like, oh, don't get phished. I go, continuous monitoring. That's every SOC's thing of, it's way better to just keep monitoring to see on the dark side if you've been, like, your password's in play than, hope you don't get phished.
Right. The other thing is that I wanted to mention in terms of accounts, by far one of that I've seen, the easiest way hackers can get into things is with old email accounts.
Yep.
Because what happens with old email accounts is oftentimes you'll reuse a password like we talked about, but you stop using that account. So flags that come up from there, you might not see anymore. Like, hey,
Yeah.
someone's tried to get into your account. You're not using it anymore, so you stop
Yeah.
paying attention. But oftentimes that email is what you use as 2-factor authentication or a login
Yeah.
for a lot of old social media sites because you made your account a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
Your old emails attached to them. So your old email has now been hacked and you don't even know because you don't use it, but now they're 2-factor authenticating all your
Right.
social media accounts,
Right.
right? Because you're not even seeing the 2-factor authentication.
Yeah. Yeah.
So updating the email you use on your accounts, whether that be social media, whether that be Amazon, whatever it is, taking away your old email and replacing it with your new email is super important
Mhm.
because of 2-factor authentication, right? Because the most important accounts you want to keep secure are your emails. Because if I can't get into your bank account or one of your other accounts I want to get into,
Yeah.
but I can get into your email, I can two-factor back to the email, have the code, and now I can get into your bank account, right?
That's fair. Why do you say old email account and you look at me? Like,
no, I think everybody uses.
I think you're directing old
No,
at me a little bit.
I've got
A little
old
bit.
I've got.
Do you have a
old
young email account? Is that what you're?
I have old email
Little bit.
accounts. No, I just think that
Little bit.
I think actually realistically you're less likely to have old email accounts because you probably use the same one.
That's fair. You could have said stale. You could have said.
Yeah,
but I get you.
stale.
I'm joking, but
yeah,
you're right.
In terms of age, like
Honestly, aging's a really relevant term. If you've got aging passwords or aging I'm a bad guy. I go after your really crappy old window. I don't go after your new system.
That's my point. And I think I actually think it's the reverse. I think people my age are much more likely to have old email accounts because when email came around, you would have done a sensible email. Whereas when email came around, I was in grade 5. So we all made silly emails, but we have a lot of stuff attached to them that we need still.
Wow.
So we don't get rid of them, but we make a new email.
Isn't that? I never thought about that, but I've been trying to retire my Hotmail account. Don't hack me.
But your Hotmail account
is attached to things, so I keep it around.
Hotmail account. My Hotmail account is a nickname.
Yeah.
Right? And my Gmail account is a legitimate one. But that's what everyone my age did, right?
Yeah.
So you forget about that old one. You still have some stuff attached to it, and then that one gets hacked. That's the weak link.
I got if you go ransomware or any modern use case and work backwards on the breaches, over 60 to 80% of them are really old Windows, RDP, not FTP, but what's the other Telnet. So their theory is those are really old legacy, not just hackable, but you ignored them, you forgot about them.
Right.
Like that's a tell, right?
So actually, on that sort of topic of that weak sort of chain of command where you've got some stuff that you maybe forgot about and now that's a vulnerability, I also wanted to get into OT security. So
nice. For
those who don't know, it's operational technology. Is that correct?
I think so. But I know where you're going. Let's I'm gonna make him. He's the lookup guy. I think you're right, and it's code for it's not a laptop and it's unmanned.
Yeah, operational technology. I just wanted to double check that.
The reason why is, and maybe I'm wrong, but I call it entity, non-person entity, and you bid on something around that with crypto, and these are unmanned, and they're also, let's call them non-standard.
Right.
But OT is code for IoT.
I've just been calling it OT for some of these acronyms. I've been calling them the acronyms for so long. I forget what they actually technically stand for.
I agree. It's like radar and sonar, and then you go actually, and my dad was into those things. Going it's range and detection, something, amplitude. Anyway, my point is, it becomes a like Kleenex. It becomes a generic term.
Right.
I always think of IoT, Internet of Things. And then OT
is different, right?
But they're the same concept of, we're not talking your laptop. We're talking kind of sensors and.
So OT would be, for instance, like a Nest thermostat or a fridge in your house. So things that have operational technology in them, but they're not necessarily a computer. They're not necessarily a phone where you have security built into them to deter viruses and ransomware and whatever the case may be, but they have ability to connect to a network.
Right. So they're connected to the network. And the other thing for me, like everyone goes like a fridge, and I go, or a pacemaker, or like when they talk about peripherals, they kind of like they don't make them critical, and I go, or a Tesla, and you go, right. Like not a fridge.
There's actually two use cases there. The fridges of the world just don't have, in my opinion, any security built into them. So they're an obvious vulnerability.
They're in your house.
But there's also the Teslas of the world where you're going, wow, if someone were to hack into that, that's a big infrastructure of problems.
One to many, right?
Right. And you could cause a lot of damage there. But on a smaller scale, you have your fridge that has Wi-Fi enabled. Great. You can check the temperature on your phone.
Like a fridge in a dump? I don't care.
Right. But your fridge in your house.
Big problem.
So you can get your Wi-Fi on there, and then now you can check the temperature and whatever, and it's cool. but there's no security built into there. And it has a Wi-Fi connection, which means it's plugged into your network, which means it's hackable. And it's a huge potential weakness in your system because it has no security backing in it.
And the other part that I'm a bit of a laggard on smart technology, but you know, when you get onto Apple and you want to move your music around, your fridge comes up and you go, that's kind of ridiculous. And you realize, oh my God, my little internal Wi-Fi network has a lot of shit on it that I didn't think was on it.
And it's technically a mini computer. So now you have a little gap, an easier key to plug into to get into your network, right?
Yeah. Where's my endpoint protection for fridges? And also those agents, as small as they get, they can't go on sensors.
Right. And so that's a huge vulnerability. The other piece of that I don't think people are very aware of is a lot of these types of technologies like a thermostat or a fridge or something, or I've heard of vacuums that now have Wi-Fi in them, things like
the Rumbas.
Right. Things of these nature are made in China, which is well known for having back doors already built into their technology. So if they decide they want to wake up the system one day that you're completely unaware of, you've already, the second that you have entered in your Wi-Fi password, you've connected it to the network, and now they are already connected to your network.
If you think about what you just said, like there's good guys, bad guys. Everything that works for bad guys also works for good guys. So good call home is Apple. Right. I love that Apple does a find me and Apple can automatically hook up, but it's the same technology as the bad guys would use against you.
Right. The Apple is using a back door to allow you to find your phone, right? Like
a trusted backdoor,
right?
Trusted, and we won't tell the agencies.
We won't tell the FBI.
But it's the same technology, right?
It's still a backdoor. Like they're able to use it for bad if they wanted to.
How many times does Apple send you an email going, "Hey, did you do this?" I go, "Geez, thank you." I go, "How do you know?"
Right. And so you have technology that's built in China that has backdoors potentially built in. You don't know, and now you have a new vulnerability. You could have a great setup at home. You could have a bunch of firewalls, a whole perimeter security, and then you plugged in your vacuum and didn't think about it, and now you're vulnerable.
You just brought up something about zero trust, right? That I kind of go, I don't like, no disrespect, I never trusted my kids with passwords and garage like codes. I go, you guys are going to get like duped, or you're going to tell your friends, and you go, it's my parents and they're paranoid, and that's fair. But now I don't like securing my house and my laptop. I go, I don't trust my devices ever,
right?
Because they're gonna be promiscuous, or they're small. Like they don't care. My fridge doesn't care,
right,
about security, and I have to believe even if I add an app and I just go, yeah, on my Wi-Fi, I kind of go, I don't really have control of, let's call it, my provenance. I haven't locked all the doors in my house because my kids have keys. And I would say the same thing about my technologies. I don't really understand my inventory like I think I do. And I've probably brought it in on different apps, or I've probably brought sensors in that I don't really understand or high tech. And so then I got to assume that people can get in and they can find my weakest link.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I think one of the big problems with that we face now is you're in a constant struggle of trying to pick between convenience and security.
Well put.
Like that's the main problem, is every time we add more convenience, you add more security vulnerability.
By definition.
Right? So when we want to make our home smarter and we want to have smart thermostats and the vacuums and fridges and all these things that we talk about, you're opening up security doors, but you cannot add those conveniences without doing that. So you have to play this balance of how much security do I want versus how much convenience do I want? And that spreads even to social media accounts, right? Like the convenience of being able to talk to many people at once and being able to put out your pictures and everyone can see them,
right,
is a security risk. You're adding more data to a database.
I'm a public person.
Right. The less you put on, the more secure you're going to be, but the less convenience in your life you have, right?
Right.
And that spreads all the way across. The better passwords you use, the more secure you are. Well, the easier it is to remember, the more convenient it is to keep using the same password, the less secure you are.
Yeah.
That's the constant struggle of like, how much convenience can I get without putting myself at a big security risk?
I wonder too if like I just said, is I like having gone on social media, I comment on that I'm a public person. I've got podcasts. I've got so if I've got my calipers too high on the convenience or fame or whatever you want to call it, I want to cover myself, and the insurance is continuous monitoring. Like you look at a bank and go, they've got the money in an ATM waiting outside. Like
Yeah.
they don't have bars, but you know they got cameras and continuous monitoring to compensate. So if you're going to be one of those people or you're one of those businesses, then I go continuous monitoring. If you're going to be a super private stealth person, then you don't need to worry as much about the monitoring. But to your point on dark web checks and all these other kind of anonymous checks, that's the counterbalance to whatever you want to do. I would go, it's not about, oh, I need more security. It's I need to check more frequently.
Right. That's also true. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up there just because conscious of time. I have a couple other topics that I think we'll wait to the next episode for. I also do want to know if anyone watches this to the end, what other topics would be interesting that you'd like either some more information on, just a basic general understanding of that you don't really get, or a deeper dive into specific areas of cyber that we can kind of make note of and add as topics.
If you don't see me after this, it's because he found a better guest. I'll be back.